Okay, so today we're going to talk about some quick steps to understanding an adjustable rate mortgage. So, if you're thinking about looking at an adjustable rate mortgage, the first thing you should look at is how an adjustable rate mortgage actually works. The second thing you should look at is what's the benefit to the goal that I'm trying to achieve with the adjustable rate mortgage. Unfortunately, a lot of the marketplace starts with the other piece in terms of get a better payment. This is a better situation for you if you're buying a starter home, right? So, if you don't plan on living there any long or refinance later or whatever it is, it usually starts with the benefit. They don't lead in with what an adjustable rate mortgage actually is. So I'm gonna give you some quick tips, some steps you can look at. So first step is you got to understand what the name is. So the name is usually some numbers. So it's usually a 5, 6, 7, 1, 10, 1, 10, 6, whatever, right? There's usually some numbers at the very beginning. Those two numbers are typically the introductory rate period and then the potential change period. So I'll use a 5, 6 and a 7, 1 30-year. 5, 6, 30-year means that for the first 5 years of the 30, the interest rate is fixed. And then the 6 represents every 6 months after the first 5 years for the remainder of the 30 years. So it's still a 30-year term mortgage that's still impacting what your payment is. It's spread out with the interest rate over that term. But the 6 is the 6 months. It can change every 6 months after that for the remainder of the life of the loan. 7, 1, same idea. First 7 years fixed. Every year after that for 30 years after the 7 or 23, it can change yearly. So once a year it can change. And again, that's more shown. That's not the only two adjustable rate mortgages out there. That's just the mechanism that you want to look for in the name, right? After that, you want to understand what caps are. Interest rate caps are the second numbers that come along with the first numbers. And I'm going to use an example today of a cap schedule of 525. So this is a very critical part of how an adjustable rate mortgage works. And forgive me if I'm looking away from the camera. I'm looking at a site script I got going on. So the 525s control the amount of change the interest rate can go through at certain periods of time, right? So a 525 cap schedule would be the 5 represents the amount the rate can change the first time it changes. The 2 represents how it can change each time after that in amount of interest rate, so 2%, 5%. And the 5 represents the max the interest rate can get to compared to the starting interest rate, right? So you need to know the caps along with that starter. Again, don't start with the benefit of I'm going to save X amount per month for 5 years. I don't know anything else what's going on, right? The next piece is the margin, floor, and index. So a good way to break that down is the margin, floor, and index are the ingredients of what goes into the rate change after the initial period's over, and the caps are the recipe, right? So we just went over the cap schedule. That's like the recipe plan, but the ingredients, like the recipe in the sense of like, you're going to start the oven and then you're going to do this and you're going to do that. So it's giving you that like step by step. The margin, floor, and index is the ingredients. It's the detail that goes into that interest rate as it adjusts, right? So I'm going to do some hypotheticals here. Let's say that the lender creates a margin because the margin is going to be a set number created by the lender you're getting the loan from. Let's say the margin's 2%, right? They come up with that number. The index is a third-party interest rate unrelated to the lender, right? I'm going to use Wall Street Journal published prime. That could be used for an index for an adjustable rate mortgage. And then the floor is just the lowest the lender will ever allow the interest rate to be, right? Now, after you're out of that introductory period and your interest rate starts to have the capacity to change, right? It's morphing into now going from a fixed rate of 7 years into now you're in the adjustable rate period. This is how that mechanism works to adjust your rate. So we're going to take the index. Let's say it's Wall Street Journal Prime. And let's say as of right now, it's 6.5%, right? Again, just using it for a mechanism. This video is going to be stale and that prime is going to move around. Don't take me for that. I don't want to update this video every single time prime changes. Just look at the mechanism I'm explaining here. So prime is 6.5%. Let's say the margin for the lender is 2%. And let's say their floor is 3.5%, right? So now we're diving into the numbers. Let's say the starting rate was 5.5%. So you had a starting rate on a 5/6 arm at 5.5%. That means for 5 years it was 5.5%. Great, fantastic. Compared to the 30-year, maybe a whole point better than what you could have got for options. You definitely save some money over those 5 years, right? Now let's look at what could potentially happen if you can't refinance out of that, or you don't sell the home, or whatever that benefit plan A doesn't work, and your rate starts changing, right? The real risk that you're signing up for. Let's do the math. 5.5, the index is 6.5, the margin is 2, the floor is 3.5. Here's how this works mathematically. I'm going to do the margin plus the index, and then I'm going to compare it to the caps as a test, and I'm going to compare it to the floor as a test to see if it passes, to see what your interest rate is going to be. Because the max the interest rate can go up is 5% the first time, which means your interest rate could be 10.5% that first move, but the margin's 2, the index is 6.5. So the potential of that first interest rate move is 8.5%. At the 8.5% mark, I look at the floor and I go, the floor is 3.5. We're above that, pass. And I look at the cap schedule. Cap schedule says, hey, a 5% can be the tally on top of the starting rate of 5.5%. That would be 10.5. We're at 8.5, so we're below that. So it passes the test. That can be your new interest rate the first time it moves. You could potentially max out your interest rate or get pretty close to it right from the jump with a schedule like that, right? And then the 2 represents every time it can move after that. And then the 5, again, like we said, is the max. So the max the interest rate can be starting from 5.5% is 5% above that, and that's 10.5%. So there are some safety nets built in there, regardless of what the index does, right? The floor and the margin are set at the beginning. The index is the variable that controls the variable part of the adjustable rate mortgage, right? So if that index goes up and down, let's say prime goes down, and here's the benefit, your rate could go down a little bit. You have a benefit to the floor there with the margin, and if prime ever gets to 1, the more margin's 2, the floor is 3.5, you could have a 3% rate. That's a benefit from that standpoint, right? So but you need the interest rate market to do that. You don't have control over that piece of it. So that's how the interest rate moves with an adjustable rate mortgage. Now, in terms of comparing it to a 30-year as a mechanism, let's not even look at the numbers mathematically of like savings or whatever, just a mechanism. You have a yearly interest rate, which is what your 30-year fixed rate really is. If it's 6.5%, that's the amount you pay yearly on the debt that you owe, and then you make payments and you owe a little bit less every time you make a payment, so you pay a little less interest, and eventually over 30 years you pay off the loan, right? So that's how that works there from that mechanism. So that's, you always pay a little bit more, a lot more than the actual 6.5% because it's a yearly rate, but the yearly rate doesn't move. So you're fixed at 6.5. So whatever that principal and interest payment is over 30 years, that's your principal and interest payment over 30 years. The buckets of principal and interest will fluctuate as you pay more interest at the beginning of the term. And every time you make a payment, you're paying a little less interest, a little less interest, a little less interest until eventually you've paid off your debt. But the total payment doesn't change. The only moving part is amount of interest compared to principal, and then it slowly, as you make payments, flips, and then eventually at a period of time, it's usually between, depending on your interest rate, I think it's around like 16, 17 years in, it flips, then you start paying more principal than interest, and you eventually pay off your debt, right? But it never changes in terms of total payment for you. So what you should be looking at when you're comparing an adjustable rate mortgage to a 30-year fixed is, what is your risk tolerance to those mechanisms? What's available to you, and how does the debt structure match your ideal situation for the house? And can you underwrite it personally with what if scenarios? Like, for example, we're going to buy a starter home that we're ideally going to live in for 3 years to 5 years, but what if we need to live there longer, right? What do? We're hoping to refinance during the introductory period because we're buying a 10-year home, but we really want a payment benefit differential for the first 5 years, so we're getting an adjustable rate mortgage because we think interest rates are going to go down. What if they don't, right? What's the plan then? run as many what if questions, scenarios at the mechanisms that you now know exist in the adjustable rate mortgage compared to the goal of getting debt, right? I think that's a big part of it is look at your goal of getting debt. Are you getting debt because you're trying to plant roots in a neighborhood for the next 20 years to a lifetime? The adjustable rate mortgage as a theory against that goal doesn't really make sense when you really think about it, because you're getting something that's risky against something that you don't really want risk with, right? So you really got to compare those two and really look at it. Don't just look at it's going to be good for 5 years. I'm going to save 10 grand over 5 years, right? Because the little known thing, well, not little known thing, but the part that's not really baked out to people when they get adjustable rate mortgages, particularly in this market right now. This is December of 2025 as I make this video. Interest rates are high relative to the past 10 years on an aggregate averages, right? So like rates were really low for a period of time. They're high now. That's a lot of pressure in the market. Consumers are trying to find ways to make houses more affordable. I completely get it. I understand the mechanism behind it. Why are we doing this? But if you need to refinance to get out of that debt, you might not have actually saved that much money relative to what the original math looked like, right? So if you do thread that needle perfectly, and you get the adjustable rate mortgage and you save $200 a month for 5 years, right? Awesome, you're gonna save over 10 grand. Great, that's spectacular. Closing costs are 10 grand. So you gotta refinance again. You hope to, because now you're buying the 30-year house with a 5-year adjustable, trying to thread that needle of keeping some savings for the first 5 years. 30-year fix is really what you want to be doing. That's the goal, is to eventually get to the 30-year fix, but at a better interest rate. So you're hedging your bet saying, I want the 30-year fix somewhere around 5.5 or 5%. Right now it's at 6 to 6.5%. So when rates navigate down, I'm going to strike when the iron's hot, jump into 30-year fix, get a better payment compared to what you've already been paying, ideally, or at least secure my future debt to know that I don't have any risk. You have no control over that. There's no control over what interest rates are going to do, not do, anything along those lines. And even if you do thread that needle, you've got to find some way to pay closing costs. So you're going to pay it in the interest rate, you're going to pay it in the principal by extending the debt that you owe, washing away a lot of the benefit you got in the savings for the duration of time you had the adjustable. And then, or you're going to pay out of pocket. Same idea, right? So the interest rate actually needs to go substantially below the starting rate of 5.5 to make it a cost benefit break even, where you can say, hey, the organic interest rate's 4.5. I'll take 5% because I'm going to take that half percentage point the lender is going to give me above what interest rates are today, and they're going to give me a lender credit to cover my closing costs. I'm going to get a better payment, and I reap the benefit of the lesser payment during the period of time. It is a threading the needle situation and does not marry over well to long-term real estate holdings for families living in a house that they need the foundation of their budget to be solid and know exactly where money is going because they have other expenses, right? Does not fit that person well. The ARM fits the person who, Mike, for 7 years, I'm going to double my payment and I'm going to pay my house off, right? I'm getting a house so well below my means that now I can look at this tool of an adjustable rate mortgage and I can use the tool to its 10th degree highest and best use, which means I'm comparing a 30-year fixed to a 7-year ARM, but I make enough money that I can pay off either quickly, right? But if I do the 7-year ARM and I make this payment schedule, which is well within my budget, I can pay the house off in 7 years and save myself, in effect, X amount of interest compared to the 30-year, because the 30-year has a higher interest rate. So every time I make extra payments, I'm paying more to interest compared to the 7-year, so on and so forth. Now you're leveraging the adjustable rate mortgage in a strong way that makes sense for what the product is, if that makes sense, right? It is not a good product for we're buying a starter condo in Boston and we're gonna live here for 3 years and sell it, right? The market fluctuates too much. You have no control over that actually being a good outcome. And it just is a very slippery slope. But I understand the need for a better payment. Take a peek at discount points. If you're looking at adjustable rate mortgage, you're already probably a pretty well qualified client. Not a lot of first-time home buyers putting 3% down, 5% down, or even less than 10% down. Not even a lot of lenders allow you to do less than 20% down to get an adjustable rate mortgage because it's a risky loan, right? It takes a certain person to get this product from that standpoint. Doesn't mean that there isn't banks that will do 5% down first-time home buyer adjustable rate mortgages. There definitely is, but you should be going into that arena very cautiously, right? Because you have no control over the market. You put 5% down and you need to sell your house next year, you're already underwater if the market is flat. Because now you need to pay closing costs, you need to pay realtors, most likely if you hire them, you need to pay attorneys, there's stamp tax, now you make, it is a slippery slope to get into that bucket of, I have a short duration potential ownership and I have a short duration debt cycle where the debt could change on me. Real estate is its riskiest in short durations. And this doesn't get talked about enough. Short duration of real estate is when real estate is risky. And what I mean by that is buying a house this year that you plan on selling next year is substantially riskier than buying a house this year that you plan on selling in 20 years. It just is. The downfall is a lot of first-time home buyers and the marketplace, in a way, it feels less risky from the jump if you're just starting to do your homework as a first-time home buyer, because you're thinking like a renter. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean it in a way that thinking like a renter is, I'm de-risking by signing a short-term lease. I don't want to sign a 3-year lease, 4-year lease, 5-year lease. I don't know if I want to live here in 5 years, right? Maybe I do, because maybe it locks in a really good, maybe I'm getting a sweetheart, maybe not. But you start looking at it a little bit differently. Say, I don't know if I want to live here that long. I'm going to live here for a year, and I want the right to renew, hopefully like an option type thing maybe. But with like some cap as to how much my rent can go up, maybe you can structure your lease that way of like, hey, I'm paying $2,000 a month for a year, and you can only increase it by $50 increments every year I renew, and I want an option to renew yearly. That would be a really good lease, right? But you're thinking that it's less risky because it's short term, and then you take that same thought process and bring it over to home ownership and go, well, we're buying the starter house, we're just going to sell it in a few years. So I don't care about all the interest rate adjustment stuff because real estate's typically always good. Most of the time it is. There are periods in time where it's not. And the periods in time where it's not hurt the people that have got into real estate recently more than the people that had owned for a longer period of time. Again, I'll explain. If you bought a house in 06, you weren't too fond of trying to sell it in 08, right? If you bought a house in 1990, you were probably okay in 08, most likely, depending on what you did with debt and all that fun stuff. That's the reality of real estate. That does not mirror over well to an adjustable rate mortgage. And it sounds like I'm throwing a lot of shade at adjustable rate mortgages, and I am, because I'm seeing them being used as a tool to fix affordability. And we've seen that card play out before, and it does not quite jive with what consumers should be hearing for information and what they should be getting for advice. They should really be trying to get into a loan that fits their needs, their abilities, their understandings, and their risk tolerance, right? It shouldn't just be skip all of that conversation. Look at this fun widget of a benefit. You get a cheaper payment for 5 years. Oh, perfect. You're buying the 3-year condo. Great. The world always goes perfectly swimmingly. Life never throws curveballs or punches you in the face. So go for it. Dive in head first. You know what? Don't even check how deep the pool is. Just dive. Go right in. That's the equivalent of that. Don't check how deep the pool is. Look at the benefit of, I like diving in the water. And boom, the pool is only 2 feet deep. Not a good outcome. That's is kind of my viewpoint on it. That's my quick steps of how to look at adjustable rate mortgage, again, without going into the actual detailed comparison of costs and closing costs and, pay this rate for this period of time and yada, yada, yada. That's what you should be doing when you're running the analysis compared to your goals, compared to the house, compared to your life and your risk threshold. That's the real way to look at adjustable rate mortgage, not at the widget benefit of I'm going to save money for 5 years.